Welcome to Reels on the Rocks, the show where your hosts Whiskey and Sweet Tea discuss film from the unpretentious perspective. It's Halloween, and we've formed a summoning circle to conjure up the Witches of Eastwick. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and as always, please be advised that spoilers are ahead. Hello, Whiskey. Would you care for another cherry?
Sure. What up, witches?
Hey, it's the spooky season, the spookiest of seasons. It's also
Closing
Whiskey's
out the
favorite
spooky
season. That's true. And it's Whiskey's favorite time of the year. As I said last episode, he assumes his ultimate form this season. So he graciously allowed me to close out the season, the spooky. Actually, I haven't even come up with the name of the season yet. I mean, I have, if you're listening to this, because I would have put a beginning on it. But at the time of recording, I hadn't come up with the name of it yet. But he graciously allowed me to have the Halloween episode this time. So we are. Anyway, so we got some stuff to talk about. I have a lot of notes on this on this film for today. Definitely. Actually, a lot more than I thought I was going to. And then, first off, let's get started with another, film topic that has been, creating buzz recently.
Yes. Very excited to talk about this. We've been talking behind the scenes about it for maybe like 2 months at this point.
Right? And so I just want to say we are going to be talking about just very briefly, the impact of the Taylor Swift Eras Tour movie that just came out last week. And I feel like I'm in a Red Letter Media review because I have the merch here that I got at the theater like they do anytime they talk about something.
It's the Nerd Crew episode of Reels on the Rocks.
Right, basically.
If anyone's never heard the show before, it's come up in past episodes, but you are a full-blown Swiftie. You are easily your favorite musician, I would argue. Probably bigger than Lady Gaga or anybody else. So this is your moment.
This is my time to shine. I'm so excited to see this concert because I saw this concert live. I was very, very lucky and very, very grateful to get tickets to see her in Arlington. And so I loved it. I was blown away by the performance, and I was excited to see her on the big screen again to kind of relive that moment. Because concert films, unfortunately, you've told me that concert films don't count towards our end of the year total. But
no. I said so. Because that was the thing. I forgot if we said this on air or not, but I asked you, have you seen a concert film before? And you kind of weren't sure if you had. Because for me, the definition is if it is a movie, it can be a recording of a concert, but it is a genre. I'm actually looking at potentially doing it for next year's lineup of reviews, because it's not a genre we've talked about. But for me, what I would constitute as a concert film would be The Last Waltz, Shine a Light. If you're a Justin Bieber fan, Never Say Never. Metallica's, oh goodness, what was that called? Into the Nether. It's it's a concert experience in movie form, as opposed to if it was at any concert. I'm sure even in the past when you've seen Taylor Swift, there are people selling DVDs or Blu-rays that are recordings of the tour.
Yeah,
that
exactly.
is not what I would consider a concert film. But this, I have not seen it, but you have. So I guess without having seen it, I'm assuming this is a concert film. But would you say that there was more put into it than just being a recording of the tour? And especially since you saw her on tour, I think that your insight is very valuable.
So, yes, okay. Because the only other concert film I have to compare this to that I remember seeing is Lady Gaga Presents the Monster Ball at Madison Square Garden. That was a big HBO special back in about 2000. I want to say it was 2010, 2011. So I had seen one before, but I would say there is work put into it. It's not just a recording. Because, for example, when I think of just a recording, I'm thinking of, when you watch recordings of, Broadway shows, and it's kind of just straight on like when they record for like posterity and stuff, it's just kind of a straight on look
Exactly.
at and this is definitely different than that. This is they're on the stage, there's editing, there's lots of editing involved. They did some graphic effects. I do know that they made some choices to cut things that didn't necessarily they didn't feel benefited the film.
I
So
think one I think one good example. So I just listed off a bunch of concert films. I'm still, because it's probably going to be on the docket for next year, that maybe we do a month of concert films to talk about it, since we haven't really touched on the genre. But out of the films I listed, one that I think kind of explains what I mean, and it's very unique to this film, but Metallica's Into the Nether. So part of the way that they make it into like a film is it's their concert, but then there's like a very cinematically told like story. Like there's like actors and there's like this narrative happening in between songs. So it's like this I forget what the story is. I think it's like this like 17-year-old kid, and it's like very post-apocalyptic and stuff, but it's like there'll be a bit of his story happening and then it'll go into another song. And that's just the way that film does it, but it's kind of what I mean. Like I mentioned The Last Waltz, and I'm going to have to bring up He Who Must Not Be Named on the show, Mr. Scorsese.
Oh,
but
God.
so that was one of his, because he's done a few concert films, but that's my favorites. That's easily one of my favorite concert films, but also I'd say that's one of his best concert films. And what made that special was I don't know if you've heard of The Band. Like it was a band in the 60s. They did kind of country rock stuff, but they were called The Band.
Yeah, I've heard
Have
of
you
it.
heard of it?
Yeah,
Okay. I guarantee you probably heard one of their songs. So the thing with that movie was that was their last performance.
Okay.
And that's why it's called The Last Waltz, is it's like, hey, this is it. Like, and it also kind of adds some meaning to it being filmed and put into a movie, because it's like immortalized. Like even if you weren't there, you can watch their last performance. So that's what just the fact this was theatrically released and the fact that it was not like a Fathom event or something.
Yeah.
I suspected this is a concert film.
Yes.
So did she do anything interesting? Like, did she, like interview people at the tour, like fans or something? Or did she have kind of a story she was telling through the course of the Eras Tour movie or anything like that?
So I would say no, because the story that was told was pretty much the same story that was told through the concert.
Okay.
And it's just, it's the whole idea of that. It's kind of like I don't want to say regurgitation, because that has a negative connotation, but it's kind of like a reliving of the eras. But in the backdrop, there's this thing that we Swifties call the Lover House. And just, the TLDR for that is if you ever watch the Lover music video, it takes place inside a snow globe, and there's a house in it, and all the rooms in the house, it looks very Wes Anderson-y, like it's a cross section of a house.
Gotcha.
They're all different colors, and each one of them represents a
different eras.
A different era, exactly. Thank you. And they're all different colors and everything. And so we visit. If you watch the tour, we visit each one of those houses, and then at the end of the show, right before she finishes off with the current album she just put out, Midnights, there's a sequence where in the backdrop the house is burning down. The whole idea is that she's ready to leave this part of her behind and move forward. So there is sort of a story that's told there. It's not as dramatic, or I think like as impressive as like what you were describing with the film, with the you were talking about the boy and his story.
It's very like, that's the thing. It's Metallica. They're not trying to be like high art or anything, but they were kind of like, ooh, what's something awesome we could do like to make this feel more like a movie. So they've got like this kind of dark action sort of thing going on. Again, with them being a metal band, it's all about
right,
ooh, explosions and stuff like. So that's kind of, again, all concert films have like a different way to make it feel cinematic.
Yeah,
and that's where I consider it. Whether it's a concert film or a recording. So it does sound like she put in the effort I'm talking about. I don't like. I kind of understand what you're talking about. If I saw this in theaters, I'd probably get it more. But that's the other question. Like, because you were really urging me to see this, And
Right.
the thing that was really making me hesitant to was because Taylor's audience has not all Swifties are crazy, but some of them can be very off-putting. And that
Yes,
was sort
I
of a
know what you
worry, was
mean.
that people were going to get rowdy. And I love that you saw this opening weekend, because I feel like if anything was going to happen, it would have been this past weekend. I didn't hear anything particularly bad, which surprises me and also makes me happy, because that was the only thing keeping me from checking this movie out. But how was your experience at the theater, and how was it different from your experience at the actual tour?
So my theater, I went and saw it at the only AMC that we have in town. I think there's two AMC's in my general area, and one of them's like 2 hours away from me, and the other one's like 30 minutes away from me. So my theater was actually, it was technically sold out. However, there were a lot of empty seats, and I think what happened was, because I bought mine like when they announced it, because they kept saying at first this was an AMC exclusive event, and then it's like then all these other theaters got it afterwards. So I think it was kind of like a deal, like maybe the first 24 hours AMC says it's theirs. So I think a bunch of people like panic bought tickets, and maybe they're planning on driving in or whatever, and then when it came to other theaters, they ended up seeing it someplace closer to them. So I think that's why my theater was empty, because my theater was technically sold out. But I had it was a pretty interesting experience, because it wasn't rowdy like the concert is. It definitely did feel like the energy was sort of the same for me as the concert, because the thing about a Taylor Swift concert, and actually not even a Taylor Swift concert, I think with most concerts, especially when you talk about ones that have a huge following, like you were talking about Metallica and everything, there is a just general sense of camaraderie. Like, you kind of just feel like you all know each other even though you've never met, and that was still present in the theater. I did get to exchange friendship bracelets with one person, and the dancing though was kept to a minimum at the back of the theater. Um,
Nice.
but I would say it was incredibly interesting, because everybody was in my theater for the most part was sitting. We had these few in the back that would got excited. Actually, some people got up and went to the back because they wanted to dance around and stuff. But what was interesting to me about this is it's incredibly different when you're not when you're seeing a concert and you're not jumping up and down and screaming, and you're not participating physically in the energy. It's kind of just letting it's hard to describe, but it's like letting the energy wash over you instead of creating the energy. And it's a little weird. I will say this. It's a little weird because you feel like you should be doing something and you're not. But it was still definitely enjoyable. It was a lot tighter than the actual concert was, as far as the timing and the changing and everything going around. I will say, though, it does pale in comparison, of course, to seeing it in person, because, like I said, just like the energy, even though it's still there, it's just completely different, and it feels a little bizarre, but it was still an enjoyable experience. I hope I answered, your questions about that.
Yes, and so I take it still seeing it live is going to be better. That wouldn't surprise me. How would because one thing I kind of talked about when I vocalized my apprehension at going and seeing this movie because of people being too rowdy.
Mm-hmm.
For someone who, for some reason, would not be able to see her live, either for being differently abled or just not being able to afford tickets. Would you say that the cinematic experience from this film would be an apt substitute for being able to go to the actual Eras tour and spend $12,000 on a
Which
ticket?
I want to put it straight out there. I did not spend 12,000. I didn't even spend over 1,000 for tickets. Like I said, I got very lucky.
No. T spent 20,000.
Oh God. Okay. I would not. I could not. I would say with that, I do think that I don't even want to use the word substitute. I do want to say this is a really good way to see it, because the way it is shot, it really does sort of bring you into it. So like even if you did see it, and let's say you weren't lucky enough to be on the floor, that's a very different experience. And so I do think this is a good alternative, simply because it does bring the upfront front row experience to you. You know, you get to see her, because I remember this is the first time I ever sat on the floor, but I wasn't like right up next to her, and I was like absolutely stoked, even though I wasn't right there, that I could like make out her facial features, you know, without looking at the big screen, because any concert I'd been to before had always been like way up high. So I do think that this, for somebody who is differently able to, for whatever reason, can't make it to the concert, I do think this is, you know, a really good experience. This is a really good way, you know, to view it. And then I do think this will become like comfort background noise almost, because I'm part of a Taylor Swift group on Facebook, and I will say, yes, there are some bizarre people in there, but one of the things a lot of people do is you know, they put, because her other concerts have been recorded. Her earlier ones I do think came out on DVD. They didn't go to theater or anything, and then her last one, the Reputation tour, went straight to Netflix. So there is sort of the just this having it on the background is kind of a comforting, I don't want to say drone, but like a comforting hum in the background that you kind of get, because you feel like you're not, you know, necessarily alone with there being a crowd there, but you're still enjoying something that you really love. So, but I do think seeing it in the theater though is a way different experience from viewing at home. And if you do get the chance to see it, I would definitely recommend it, because concerts themselves are especially well put together ones, and ones put together by storied groups, you know, like Metallica, Rolling Stones, you know, Bruce Springsteen. Even if the production isn't over the top, they sort of have a larger than life presence. And I think that does carry over well on the big screen. It really does sort of give you that larger than life experience just watching this. So I do think this is a good, you know, alternative for people who didn't get the chance to see it. And I would like to piggyback on that, because I actually have some articles I looked up about this, because I know you said you were concerned about, you know, how rowdy people got. So I found this article from, I believe it's The Slate. And I was stupid enough to search for something else after. Right, there it goes. It's called Tale of Two Taylors by Heather Schwedel. So they did talk about how there seems to be two polarizing experiences in the theater right now. There are the people who go, and then they talk about, you know, they're in a theater where there's a lot of singing, dancing, people jumping around, people screaming, where, you know, it is like a concert, which is what I think you were worried about. And there are some people who did not like that. This one person said, I couldn't even hear Taylor over the people screaming the lyrics, which, you know, if you're gonna go see a movie, you're even though it's a concert, you're still expecting sort of the same sort of movie experience. You know, you're paying for, you know, the seats, the big sounds and everything. You want to be able to experience that yourself. Go ahead.
The etiquette is what worries me, and that person is kind of hitting the nail on the head. It's like, you know, if you're going to see the movie, you are wanting to hear Taylor. You know, I can understand people wanting to dance and sing and stuff, but like, it's, you know, like if you see this in a stadium, like if you went to the actual tour, no one's going to be able to drown it out. And also it's sort of expected you're going to dance and stuff just because it's a concert. It's not a movie. So like that's where I told you I was kind of on the team of people who weren't happy that Taylor sort of egged on people. It's like, you know, you can have a fun time, sing along and whatever, but if it gets to the point where the crowd is like out of control, like not even to the point where it's like a riot or anything like that, but just where everybody is singing, it's like you won't even be able to hear the movie. And that's kind of, you know, I'm not even a Taylor fan. Well, like, you know what I mean? I'm not in the same ballpark as you, but like if I were going to see this based on your recommendation, that's kind of where I would get annoyed, where it's like, hey, I'm trying to pay attention to the movie. Can you stop kicking my seat while you're in time with Anti-Hero, you know?
Right. And, you know, there were some, and so like this person in their article, they said, what did they say? The screenings were described as pretty lit. Some screenings are described as pretty lit, complete with loud singing and people setting up to dance. And some fans formed circles in front of the theater holding hands, which was cute, if a little cultish. And not everyone was happy about it, with fans having videos of depicting fans having semi-religious experiences at the movie were accompanied by posts like this one, where a user complained about the worst screening ever, can't even hear Taylor, and indeed other comments on the TikTok bemoaning the overhyped movie experience spoke up to say they would prefer it that way. Some people said, unpopular opinion, I actually want my session to go like this. I don't have tickets for the concerts. I want to be able to see it and enjoy it. So that was definitely, it didn't seem to be something to where it was like, oh my God, like everybody was covering like how bad this was going. It seemed to kind of be, some sessions went like this, but I saw a lot of, especially in my group, people being like, what I'm trying to say, what did they say? Basically, it was like, there they talk about in this article too, the everybody, some people were upset that their screening was like quiet, and nobody got up and danced, and they were like, oh, it was too chill. So there seems to be two ends of the spectrum on this, and I guess Variety posted an article about how people were worried about the theater etiquette, but the thing about the Variety article, according to this writer, is that it didn't cover the people who want it that way. So then people started talking about, well, maybe there should, which they were never going to do, maybe there should be a quiet screening and then a dance party screening. And I just think that's too much. The people I do feel for, though, is there were some people who talked about how, they have like sensory, like overload issues.
Yeah.
And they were like, I wanted to go see the concert, but I'm scared that I'm going to have a panic attack or a breakdown because, of all the screaming and carrying on and everything. So, like I said, it does seem like there were some screenings that went the way that, like I said, you weren't excited about.
It would go.
Yeah, fear to go, but it didn't seem to be a widespread occurrence, because I feel like if it was, there would be like, on Good Morning America, outrage this morning as no one's able to enjoy the movie next door due to screaming in the theaters.
As of when we're recording this, it's almost into the next weekend, so yeah. I didn't hear anything, so I knew it probably wasn't that bad. But that's also why I avoided... Well, even if I wasn't trying to avoid opening weekend, I doubt I would have probably been able to find a seat, because it was so... I think it is like the most pre-ordered tickets since something like Avengers Endgame. I forget how well it did, but it was one of the most like sold out like pre-sales AMC has like ever had.
Yeah. I think they said that it was I think it shattered records for concert films.
There's no way any concert film ever did better than this. And there's been some big ones, like Metallica's did really well. I remember when I was in high school, the Michael Jackson one, This Is It, did really well.
Oh yeah.
But like that's the thing. Taylor Swift is on another level. Like she's at the point where she's like Madonna in the 80s. Like, it is absurd how crazy popular she is. Like I would say out of the type of music you listen to, I'm more of a Lady Gaga fan. And she's definitely blown up in her acting career, but I don't even think Lady Gaga has had this much success.
Yeah, I don't think I don't think that she,
for that matter, she's another one that's like,
because Beyonce was the other. She was the other huge tour that happened this year, and she just finished her tour. Taylor's taking a hiatus right now, and she's going to hit Europe next. But the Renaissance tour is going to be coming out in film too. So like that, because I kind of wanted to see the Renaissance tour. I wasn't a big enough fan to shell out a lot for money for tickets. So I'm excited for the reason I can go and experience kind of the tour. In a much more cost-effective way, and maybe even a little bit more comfortable, because like if you're not super into the artist or whatever, I sometimes feel like concerts can just be an uncomfortable experience, especially if you don't get into it.
I think because I've seen a lot of concert films for artists I'm not like super into. Last Waltz, like as I said, I really like that movie, but I'm not really a huge fan of the band. I feel like that's kind of where it piques my interest, is if they come up with an interesting way to make the concert into a film. That's something that can really appeal to me. Because This Is It, the Michael Jackson one, that's another one like The Last Waltz, where they made the film out of footage, because he was going to go on a last tour before he passed away, and they had footage of like him practicing and doing all this stuff, and so they made a concert film out of like that footage.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of an interesting thing with it too. So what do you predict? Do you think this will do better than the Renaissance Tour movie, and do you think this will get any awards attention?
So this is my take on it. First off, to your first question, I really don't like to pit two superstars against each other. I do feel like maybe this one will do just a little bit better because I do just feel like her audience is a bit wider than Beyonce's is, even though Beyonce's audience is huge and crosses multiple demographics. I do feel like this one's going to be huger. Yeah.
I'm going to agree with you because and this is no shade to Beyonce, but I've been hearing about Taylor so much this year that when I heard that her album Renaissance came out, I was like, wait, she released something?
Oh, yeah.
And again, I'm not trying to be mean. I genuinely didn't know until I think it was like the Grammys a few months ago when she was like nominated. And I think she lost to Taylor Swift, which pissed some people off. But I was kind of in the camp of, wait, Beyonce released an album this year?
Right.
So I kind of agree that I think Taylor might do better, but we'll see. It's crazy how popular she is, deservedly so, but still, it's wild.
And then as far as your second question goes, as far as any awards recognition, I feel like it might get something at, like the Editor's Choice Awards, or something very technical, like just maybe for like in the cinematography, maybe action for best cinematography for a live event or something like that. Maybe it might get some attention there. I don't really think it's going to, unfortunately, get noticed anywhere else, because I remember a few years ago when people wanted Hamilton to be nominated for Best Picture, and the Academy said, we don't accept recordings of live, recordings of live event or something like that. And somebody commented, isn't that just what a movie is? You're recording live acting, which I thought was funny because they're technically correct. If you really
technically correct.
But
I was on the side. This is the year we started this podcast, and I was on the side of the Academy. I still am. That was a great way of seeing Hamilton, especially if you didn't have the money or time or whatever to go to Broadway. But again, it's like if I would consider a concert film a film because there's cinematic qualities to it, and also there's things about it, like I think a lot of concert films sometimes take performances from different shows on the tour. So it's like, oh, this song you're seeing in Minneapolis, this song you're seeing in Miami, that sort of thing. Whereas like that Hamilton performance was just one of the performances they did, but they filmed it.
Yeah.
And it was great, but it's one of those things where like, what is a movie? And I feel like, at least with my own personal definition, that, that Hamilton, it doesn't really fit the bill, even though it was very good.
Yeah. No, and I definitely see that school of thought. There was a couple things before we move on that I want to touch on about this. This is breaking today as of 2:37 p.m. Christopher Nolan has spoken out about the film, and has praised the way that it was released. Because and this is an article in Variety by Zach Sharf. He said Nolan commended Swift for the business move because, as you know, she didn't use a distributor. She basically went directly to the theater and said, this is what I want to do. Will you show it? And so he said Taylor Swift is about to show studios because her concert film is not being distributed by the studios. It's being distributed by a theater owner, AMC, and it's going to make them an enormous amount of money. Nolan said, and this is the thing, theatrical exhibition is a format and a way of seeing things and sharing stories or sharing experiences. That's incredibly valuable. And if the studios don't want it, somebody else will. So that's just the truth of it. So we have, one of the big directors of right now coming to the defense of Taylor. Not really that she needs to be defended, but when commented on it, he didn't do what I like to call to the Scorsese reaction of rolling his eyes and saying it's not cinema. So I was
Well, and I
very,
told
very
you, man. I told you Chris Nolan was a nice guy. And same thing. Also, like as much as your hatred for Scorsese is known, I actually think I'd love for someone to ask him because I do think he would consider this Taylor's film cinema. Because part of the reason I'd love for someone to ask him that is the reason I think he would consider it cinema is he's done several concert films.
yeah.
So I would think he would believe, he in his mind he would consider it cinema. But if he is, I would love to see him say it isn't, because then it's kind of like, well, wait
It's
a
like,
second.
well,
sir.
wait a second.
So yeah, I'd love for someone to ask. But there you go. I'm happy, especially after we like recently were talking about Chris Nolan at some point this year. I remember he came up or it was Oppenheimer, and I was just like, oh, finally he can calm down. My theory was that he had been traumatized by the release of
by
Tenet.
Tenet.
It made him temporarily insane, and seems like it, because there you go. I told you, man. He's not pretentious. He's not a jerk.
Yeah. Well, and he sees the value
power of the Taylor Swift.
He sees the power to it, but he also recognizes the value of the theater going experience in a way that isn't pretentious.
Well, and it goes back to what I was saying about because he was like trying to get people back into theaters before it was safe, and to me it felt like it wasn't so much an ego thing as much as he was afraid theaters would not exist after the pandemic. So even though I didn't agree with him doing what he did, I was like, I don't think it's like a personal thing. I think he's genuinely scared that people won't go to the movies anymore.
Right.
And based on his opinion with this, it would seem I'm right. I think he just really likes people going to the cinema. And so it would sound like he's, in support of it for that reason.
Well, what's interesting is because Killers of the Flower Moon just came out, and it's expected to do. It was #1 at the box office this weekend, followed closely. I think it was closely by the.
It actually has. It's supposed to come out this weekend, so I guess that was just
maybe that would. Maybe that was
it
or
comes
maybe
out tomorrow. So
okay, then I may have been looking at projections then. But what's interesting about that is with Killers of the Flower Moon coming out is I was thinking about Martin Scorsese and Christopher Nolan, and how for the longest time Martin Scorsese has been kind of the go-to for we want to hear his thoughts on movies, his thoughts on this, and the fact and I think Christopher Nolan is starting to be like that for like the next generation of people, because I think, just for lack of a term, I think he's just more in touch with what is happening in movies, because some of the things that Martin Scorsese, whether you like him or not, does seem a little bit out of touch with what's going on, and like his famous "I don't have time to write female characters" quote from a few years ago. He just seems like a little out of touch with things. So I do feel like not like immediately, but I do think in the future, maybe perhaps after Scorsese has passed on, I think it is entirely possible Christopher Nolan could pick up that torch, as far as being the go-to person to ask about cinema and everything, because with Martin Scorsese's movie coming out, it's gonna do well, because his movies as of recently do sort of well, but I do think and I think they're like, oh look, Oppenheimer did really well, and I think they're taking the wrong message away from that again, because I think Oppenheimer did really well because just among, like I said, a new generation of filmmakers, of audiences, of everything, people are like, oh, it's the new Christopher Nolan movie. Like, I feel like if somebody else had made Oppenheimer, and they'd put it out, they'd put it out, I don't think there would have been the buzz about it. I do think Christopher Nolan's name means something to this current generation of theater goers, much like Martin Scorsese did in the past. I could be totally wrong, but I kind of think that's kind of the path I see Christopher Nolan going in.
No, I think you're right. I think he could be that person in the future. He definitely has a very similar career to Scorsese, in that he has a type of movie that he makes. He makes it really well. And one thing I don't know if you know about Martin Scorsese is he didn't win an Oscar until Goodfellas, and it was kind
Hmm.
of this thing where he kept putting out these movies that were regarded as masterpieces, and everyone was like, "Why hasn't he won Best Director yet?" And it was like a big deal when he won for Goodfellas because it was kind of like finally, you know.
Hmm.
And it's sort of the same thing with Christopher Nolan because a ton of his movies, whether it's like his Batman movies or Inception or Oppenheimer or Dunkirk or Memento, like he's released a lot of like certified classics at this point, and he
Right.
still hasn't won Best Director. So if and I kind of am, we'll when we do our Oscar predictions for next Oscar season, we'll see. But so far, I'm kind of thinking he might win for Best Director, and it might be sort of a Goodfellas situation where he like finally wins it this year. But we'll
Yeah.
see. But one thing what you were saying kind of touches on that. You know, like a lot of people, some people I think don't understand why people like Quentin Tarantino are so popular, and it's very rare nowadays where a director on their own will get people to go see a movie. Like,
Right.
you know, box office draws nowadays are based on IPs. You know, superhero movies are a big one, or just like franchises that people are familiar with. The thing that's really special about Christopher Nolan or Quentin Tarantino or Jordan Peele or, you know, like any of these types of directors, and hopefully we'll see if maybe Greta Gerwig becomes that way too, because so far she's on a really good path as a director. But it's so rare for there to be a director that is a box office draw in and of themselves that's sort of going away, and that's something that Scorsese still can do. We'll see how he does this week with Killers of the Flower Moon, but it'll probably do pretty well. But that's kind of an interesting thing you don't see as much nowadays is directors that they themselves inspire buzz.
Right. And I think, but like I said, I think one of the reasons, because I keep hearing the same line with Oppenheimer and stuff. Oh, this audiences are eager for fresh new stories. You see, we saw this with Barbie and Oppenheimer. And I think they're missing the point. I think with Barbie, I think just with Barbie specifically, I think there was just a buzz just around how cool this movie looks and how people. I think that was a lot of that was nostalgia that led over into, fortunately, a fabulous movie that came out. But I think with Oppenheimer, like I said, if anybody else had made it, it wouldn't have had the draw. I think specifically
Exactly.
with him, people are like, oh, it's Christopher Nolan. Okay, we got to see this because we know it's going to be stellar. And so, but so whenever I kind of hear them go, oh, with Oppenheimer, we learned I still want fresh stories. I'm like, I think people went and saw it more for Christopher Nolan than for the story. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, people still had a fantastic time and they enjoyed it. And they did get to see an original story for it, but it wasn't just because it was an original story. Lastly, before we move on, I just wanted to add that I just want to add a few more things about the tour, which is another according to another Variety article called. This one's called "Why Isn't Taylor Swift's Eras Tour Playing in Theaters During the Week?" This is by Rebecca Rubin. So what's interesting about this is moving forward, the movie's only gonna be playing Thursday through Sunday, and if you think about it business wise, that makes sense because a lot of her audience are people who are in school, so they're not going to be seeing it. And also, Taylor has said that she thinks the film is best enjoyed with a packed theater. You know, whether it's hopefully she didn't say rowdy, but you know, with lots of energy going on. So she kind of wants that experience too. So by, you know, kind of forcing into these 4 days a week, it's really kind of forced you to have a particular type of experience, which is great. I really, really like that idea. And then secondly, we have the totals here. It says the film tallied, this is from CNBC by Sarah Whitten. It says it tallied 92.8 million during its first 3 days of theater. It said it fell slightly shy of AMC's expectations, which were 95 million. And they said it's an enormous success given its genre and the limits of its release. They also said that the last minute Thursday night previews still grabbed like 2.8 million for an opening day total of 37.5 million, making it the second highest October opening behind The Joker from 2019. Which got 13.3 million on Thursday previews. So, you know, this is a huge film. Whether or not you were Taylor Swift fan, this is huge. People are skeptical, though, to call it an industry disruptor. They're calling it a unicorn film. But this is a really interesting, even if you're not into Taylor, this is interesting from just a business perspective and a movie theater perspective, how well this film is doing. So, we just wanted to talk briefly about that, and we still, of course, want Whiskey to go see it because, why not? I mean, I'll even buy your ticket for you, so, no risk.
If you're listening to this on YouTube, 1,000 likes, and I will go see it.
Oh, come on. So with that being said, let's transition to our main topic. But first off, Whiskey, what are you drinking?
Well, I already caved and had a sip. So I'm chilling out this episode, closing out October with an Elysian Night Owl Pumpkin Ale with a cool owl staring at me on the bottle. Had a sip. It's delicious. If you're a beer person, there's all sorts of fun pumpkin things. I think last year I had a pumpkin cider, which was really good. I think if I remember correctly, it was one of my favorite cider things, Ace. But yeah,
we had a discussion about Ace.
Oh yeah. But yeah, went to Bevmo. Never heard of Elysian before, but I'm a sucker for a mascot, and they got a cool looking owl for their Night Owl Pumpkin Ale, so I grabbed that. But what about you, T? What are you having?
So I'm having, given our movie, I had to be on theme. So I'm having a cherry bourbon smash.
Nice.
I did try to go over the top and be super extra by making ice cubes that had cherry pits frozen in them. That was a spectacular failure. But the fact that I made the effort, though, I think is still worth something.
I mean, who knows? You might have accidentally cursed someone with those pits. So you might have saved a life.
So, if Cherry Pits hasn't given it away, our movie that we're discussing today is 1987's Witches of Eastwick, which, as we will talk about later, pairs pretty perfectly with our last episode of this month, our previous episode for this month, which was Suspiria, also about witches.
You could say, T, that this is the season of the witch. Halloween. Oh my 3.
God. Listen, that's the best Halloween. Fight me.
It's a good one. I like it. And people have come around on it. I like it. I kind of wish they had just kept doing that for the future of Halloween. I feel like would have had more longevity that way. But you never know. I mean, the last 3 that came out the last 5 years or whatever have been doing well.
So we had a happy surprise with this when I went to go do my research for it. Directed by George Miller.
Oh, I noticed that.
You probably saw. You saw that probably immediately. If you know, it's the Mad Max franchise, and obviously his biggest hit, Babe, Pig in the City, and of course the original Babe. I just love it. He's done great work. I love Fury Road. Great work. It was written by Michael, and I'm trying to read my own handwriting. I think it's Christopher, who also wrote Bonfire of the Vanities, which is one of the greatest movie failures in Hollywood. He also wrote the pilot episode for for an adaptation of this into a TV format called Eastwick. So he wrote the pilot for that. He also did some acting too. He provided voices in The Exorcist, and he was in My Robot as well, so that was pretty interesting. This is, though, it was adapted from the book by John Updike, also called The Witches of Eastwick. Cinematography was by Vilmos Zsigman, who also did the cinematography for Close Encounters of the Third Kind, The Deer Hunter, and Deliverance. Music was by John Williams. No explanation needed there. And then the production design, this is pretty interesting. There's a small rabbit hole here, but I just found it fascinating. Production design was done by Polly Platt. And the thing about Polly Platt, she was also a producer. So she is credited with discovering Sybil Shepherd, Owen and Luke Wilson, the director Wes Anderson, and she suggested that James L. Brooks meet Matt
Groening.
Okay, I can't. Yeah, so basically people have kind of speculated that she may have inadvertently been responsible for The Simpsons. But she also did the production design for Terms of Endearment, A Star is Born, and the Bad News Bears. And I'm talking about the 1970s versions of those two movies. The budget for this movie was $22 million. It tripled its budget with a box office of $63.8 million. It was nominated for several awards. At the Academy Awards, it was nominated for Best Original Score and Best Sound. BAFTA, it won for Best Special Visual Effects. It was nominated for a Grammy for its score for John Williams, and it was nominated for a ton at the Saturn Awards for Best Fantasy Film, Best Actor, which it won for Jack Nicholson, Best Actress for Susan Sarandon, Best Supporting Actress for Veronica Cartwright, Best Writing, Best Music, and Best Special Effects. The cast is populated by Jack Nicholson as Daryl Van Horn, Cher as Alexandra, Susan Sarandon as Jane, Michelle Pfeiffer as Suki, Richard Jenkins as Clyde. And it was funny is because I know Richard Jenkins has been in a ton of stuff, and I was like, why do I know the name? I know the name, I know them. He was in Shape of Water, and I totally forgot about that. Another favorite of mine.
Oh yeah! Oh my god! I knew his name sounded familiar.
That was me, and I'm looking, and I'm like, okay, yeah, he was in that. I'm like, I knew the titles and stuff, but I'm like, that's not what it is. And then I got it. He was The Shape of Water. Felicia was played by Veronica Cartwright, and Fidel was played by Carol Strucken. I really need to practice these words before I start recording. So this film, as we can tell by its box office, was a success.
Well, I'll interject one thing. It's funny. I didn't notice it was John Williams, although that makes sense because one of the things I liked the most was the music. But you forgot. It was nominated for Best Visual Effects, but did you see who did the visual effects, T? It was ILM.
It was ILM, yes.
Industrial Light and Magic.
So I knew ILM did something for the film, but because of my research, they don't just say special effects by ILM. They usually put who the lead person is, and I wasn't sure if they were affiliated with ILM. But yes, special effects were done by ILM. And there's an interesting factoid about that. So before we get into the behind-the-scenes magic and mystery, this is your first time seeing this film, correct?
Yes.
So what were first impressions walking away from it? What are we feeling?
Well, so I do have my criticisms, but this is a good movie. It's one of those things where it's like it just didn't appeal to me. My highlights, all three of our witches are some of my favorite actresses, especially Michelle Pfeiffer. Gotta love her. Susan Sarandon was great. Cher, everyone always forgets, man. Cher is a really good actress. Whether it's Moonstruck or whether it's Stuck on You, she's always really good. The music was a big standout for me. I was very surprised that George Miller did it, but it got me excited when I saw that. I'm like, ooh, this is going to be surprisingly good. And I do find it funny how I didn't notice it was John Williams doing the music until you said it here. Somehow, I guess I missed that credit. But that makes sense, because the music, I was thinking about it for the last few days. Tunes from it would come into my head. The thing initially I'm going to get into, I think it was 2 Halloweens ago. It might not have even been on Halloween, but you know what this really reminded me of was Death Becomes Her, because you've got a very famous director, an all-star squad of people working on it, because I think Danny Elfman did the music for that movie.
Yeah, I think so. You're right
about that. You had Bruce Willis. You had, oh my goodness, I forgot who the 2 women were in that. And then you've got, basically, it's
that was Goldie Hawn and Meryl Streep.
Goldie Hawn and Meryl Streep, that's it. But yeah, so just like that movie, you've got basically an R-rated comedy with kind of spooky things in it.
Yeah.
I was talking about this with someone the other day, where it's just like that movie. This is a hard movie to really pin into a specific genre. I wouldn't call it a romantic comedy. I wouldn't call it a drama. I wouldn't call it horror. It doesn't really. It's kind of got a negative connotation to it, but this is the sort of movie I would reserve the term chick flick for, just in the sense that it's you can't really pigeonhole it into a generic genre, but it is intended for a female audience. This is a movie that women are going to like, and made for women. So in that sense, I would call it a chick flick. But like, it reminded me, not in the story, but because also Industrial Light and Magic did the special effects for Death Becomes Her as well.
Yes,
So
and
it's
I
just
did
crazy
just
how
go
many
back.
things.
I did just go back to the page. So I have the same notebook for every episode. The music for that was done by Alan Silvestri.
Okay, but there you go, another
Yeah,
big composer.
yeah.
Uh, yeah, it's oh, and I will also just, because I don't think I've ever had the opportunity to say so on the show, because I don't think we reviewed anything with Jack Nicholson in it before, but he's one of my all-time favorite actors. I think this is a great role for him because I think he's good at both being repulsive and charming, and this is like a great role for him to do both at the same time.
I think one of the things I felt for the first time I saw this was because they wish for a handsome man, and I'm like, I would never describe Jack Nicholson as handsome, but
If you go back to like the
he
60s,
he's incredibly you are right, he is incredibly charming.
yes. Well, and also he if you go back to when he was like in his 30s, he was pretty handsome. It's almost ironic that like a good chunk of his career, like he started in kind of the anti-establishment cinema days, but like I'd say the majority of his career was like the 80s, 90s, and 2000s when he was like middle-aged, not very attractive looking. But I would say, like, especially in this day and age when there are so many men having trouble getting dates, it's like, this is, dude, you don't have to be a Chad. Like, you just need to be interesting or charismatic. Like, this character in this movie is kind of a great example of, he is repulsive and not what you would consider like a hot guy to be, but he's getting 3 chicks at once because he's just got that riz.
Yeah. No, I got you. So before we go further, like I said, this was based on a book that was published by John Updike, by the same name. So just major differences. The book was supposed to be darker. The thing about John Updike, what I was reading, is he put a lot of like religious themes in his books.
Yeah,
And kind of
I got a
had
bit of that in the movie, but it was almost kind of like satirical. Well, like not satirical. They were making fun of religious people in this movie, so it almost makes me wonder, with you saying that, if like they kept the themes but like made fun of the people who were thinking that way.
Well, and again, I haven't read the book, but from what I was reading, he did lots of commentary on, like, for like families and family structure and American life, and kind of what he saw as the decline of it. And keep in mind, he was writing in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, maybe even the 80s. So it was interesting that he saw, progression and progress as more of a downfall, which I thought was pretty interesting. But to illustrate what I mean, Daryl is, he's supposed to be essentially the devil.
And I got that quite quickly, and I was wondering if the film was ever going to explicitly say it, but it never did. But
it never did. It got close.
I mean,
but
Van Horn, and also like, if you know anything about like witch lore, it's like, oh, they're the brides of Satan. So I was like, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
Because I was kind of, I read like the synopsis, before I clicked on the movie to watch it. And so I was expecting it was going to be more of like a weird science, but with magic kind of thing, where it's like these women make the perfect man, but they like use magic instead of like science. And then as the movie was going, I'm like, oh, okay, they didn't make him. He's the devil. Like,
he was kind of like summoned instead.
Yeah, well, like he could tell that they were magically sensitive, and I guess that drew him there. But like that too, he's also like not real. He's just being he's very manipulative. Every one of them he's around, he acts a different way, kind of based on what they're attracted to.
Mm-hmm.
So he's like not even being genuine with them. He's just kind of acting a part,
right?
Sort of. At least that's the vibe I got. Like,
no,
again, I'll get into more of my criticisms. It has nothing really to do with the filmmaking. It's more of like the story that just didn't really appeal to me. But that's like kind of my take on his character anyway, is that he wasn't he he wanted something, and he knew how to get it. He wasn't
Yeah.
really into being romantic or caring about them or anything. He knew what got them off and acted the part accordingly.
Right. Just to finish the part about the book, what's interesting is I said he does commentary on religion and like what he saw the downfalls of America and things like that. So what's interesting in the book from what I've read is it's not just our three main characters who have these kind of powers to kind of will things into existence. It's all unmarried women. So that's interesting that he did that. I guess also in the book, Daryl marries another woman named Jenny, and our heroines become jealous and they cause her to die of cancer. In the book, none of the witches I think got pregnant. And then see, this is where I'm like, this is where this guy's kind of, I don't think I'd be friends with him. At the book ends with Daryl leaving town with Jenny's brother Chris as his lover. So definitely trying to put some, he's trying to equalize homosexuality with some other stuff in there. So the book sounds like it's a piece of work. But so I'm glad they did, because it's interesting because the movie's kind of more of an empower. It's not like, like I wouldn't describe it as like an empowered, but it definitely has more of a feminist tone to it.
Absolutely. Hey,
Than this book sounds
do
like
you
it
think
is.
that any of the author's friends ever, when they were, greeting him, do you think they were ever like, "Hey, what's up, Dyke"?
Oh my god. Okay, you know what? Stop before
Stop.
before we get demonetized. Okay, just
No, for sure.
we're not
Well,
even monetized yet.
We have to be monetized first.
Exactly.
His name is Updike. His name is Updike, and yeah, no, he sounds kind of like that guy from the '50s who wrote those like morality comic strips, the Chip Tracks.
Mm-hmm.
Like it sounds like the same deal, except I guess he just wrote mediocre novels that got turned into feminist movies.
So I'm gonna go before we continue talking about. I'm gonna go through some behind the scenes stuff that I thought was interesting. So Daryl was originally supposed to be Bill Murray, but I guess he dropped out of it. But I do think I could see Bill Murray in this role though, like '80s Bill Murray in this role. I
think
definitely
this
see
was right around the time the famous Murricane divorce was going on, as Bill Murray's friends put it. So I think this was
probably
busy,
why he dropped out then. Yeah.
Yeah, most likely. Well, and then in the early '90s, he was just doing garbage, and then, well, he did do Groundhog Day. I think was '90 or '91, so he did that. But it was like the later '90s. He was doing like that movie with him and the elephant and some other stuff like that. His like career went down, and then Wes Anderson saved it.
Wes Anderson.
But anyway, yeah. So Bill Murray would have been good for the role. I feel like Jack Nicholson, if you're going to cast someone as the devil, he's definitely in your top tier people to cast.
Right, because I feel like even like back, I've always said that Jack Nicholson was sort of wrong for The Shining, because he comes across as crazy from the beginning, and from what I remember of the book, he's supposed to gradually become mad. And like the dude looks unhinged from the start. So I think
that's why Stephen King hates the movie, or he used to hate the movie, because Kubrick just had no interest in caring about the source material. He was just going to make his own movie.
I know. I have thoughts on that, but we'll save that for a different time.
For sure.
So yeah, but what's interesting is Jack Nicholson got interested in it because his girlfriend at the time, Angelina Huston, was reading for was auditioning for one of the witches, and so Jack Nicholson came aboard because he liked the part, he read the part, he really liked the part, he wanted to get on board, and of course he's Jack Nicholson. The studio, was like, yes, of course, Jack Nicholson, welcome aboard. Unfortunately, his girlfriend had a disastrous audition, which she admits was awful, so she didn't get into it. But some interesting stuff about George Miller and Sharon. I don't know if you know anything about this.
I don't. Spill the tea, Mr.
Yeah,
T.
so we do have some tea here. So I'm going to go ahead, and I made a note here, read transcript. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this. So it said that, this is according to the trivia section on IMDb, which was later corroborated partly in an interview with Cher. It says that Warner Brothers basically really wanted Cher because she was a hot commodity at the time. But Miller kept complaining in front of Cher to the studio executives that he did not want Cher to ruin his movie. And whenever he said Cher, he would make quotation mark signs with his hands all in front of Cher. So they already they were already off to a rocky start. And of course, Cher wound up playing the Alexandra role perfectly, and there was no complaints from critics about her performance. And, she wound up, winning the Academy Award that year before Moonstruck. But this is where it gets juicy, and I can't believe he did this. So Cher told the Hollywood Reporter that the director, George Miller, gave her a very nasty phone call on her 40th birthday. Right before she was going to be cast in this film, she said, Cher continued, and I quote, "And in the morning, my telephone rang, and the man said, 'Hi, Cher, it's George Miller.' And I said, 'Hey, George.'" He was the director of Witches of Eastwick. So he said, "I just wanted to call and tell you that I don't want you in my movie. Jack Nicholson and I think you're too old and you're not sexy." She said that she was heartbroken. She wanted the movie so bad, and she said, "Usually in Hollywood, if you insult somebody, you hang up." And she said, adding that Miller was relentless in his run of insults. "He didn't want to hang up. He just wanted to tell me everything. I hate the way you walk. I hate the way you talk. I don't like the color of your hair. I don't like your eyes." So Cher hit back at him, and I love this. So she was like, "Okay, look, mother effer." Uh, you didn't find me under a rock. I was nominated for an Academy Award for Silkwood, and I got the Cannes Film Festival Award for Best Actress in Max. So goodbye. But she ended up, she did. It was interesting is he said that about Jack Nicholson 1 or 2, but she didn't have any problems with Jack Nicholson. She even appeared later at one of his birthday parties. But I cannot believe, because I had after when we did our Mad Max episode, I had such a high opinion of him, and I'm actually shocked that he behaved that way.
Me too. That's crazy. It's actually crazy to me because I was I was letting you finish, but I was thinking of Moonstruck in my head. I was like, was this before or after that came out? Because if it was before, I could see him being like, oh, she's a pop star. She doesn't know how to act. But
right.
If it was after that movie, it's like, dude, she got nominated for Best Actress. Give her some credit.
Well, not only because this year, but she told them, look, I was not already nominated for Best Actress for Silkwood, and she had won a acting award at Cannes already. And the fact that he, for some reason, but I mean, to call somebody and tell them this, I was just like, dude, what is wrong? There's a difference between that and going behind the scenes being like, I don't think she's good for the part. I don't think her looks good. That's it. But he did all this in front of her, and he called her and told her that he didn't think he thought she was too old and she wasn't sexy. It's like,
it's funny, man. Well, and it's also, it makes me wonder if what his opinion on that would be now. Like if he feels bad that he did that, or if he still feels that way, or what the deal is.
I would love a follow-up.
It seems so out of character from what everyone said about him. It kind of reminds, what it reminds me of, because you brought up Bill Murray. I guess this is why it's stuck in my mind, because he was really mean to Lucy Liu on Charlie's Angels. Although Bill Murray has a history of being mean to people, so it's not exactly the same. But that is interesting. And did you say he also didn't want Jack Nicholson? Like, he obviously didn't call Jack Nicholson up, but did you say he didn't want him on the movie either?
No, he said that I don't want you in this movie, and Jack Nicholson doesn't want you in it either. That's what he said.
I imagine Jack Nicholson, if he were in the room, he'd just be like, "Hey, man, I didn't say shit." Who knows? That does make me wonder. Did Jack Nicholson feel that way? I don't know if he really ever cared that much about who he was, acting with. I don't know if he's ever really had a strong opinion on that.
But she's appeared, she's met with him. She's called him very sweet several times. So I don't know if maybe there was some beef. They obviously quashed it because they don't have any issue now.
So since then they've been good.
Yeah, so since then they've been good. So again, I don't know if that was just him saying that or if there was anything actually behind that. But the more I read about this, there was definitely some drama in the casting process for this. So one of the things is they had, I guess, cast. Cher wanted to play the Susan Sarandon character. I mean, she wanted to play Alexandra, the character she plays in the movie. But I guess they had already cast Susan Sarandon in the role. And so, because I said Warner Brothers was so desperate to get Cher in this movie, they like, sure, you can play Alexandra. But they never told Susan Sarandon, so she shows up on set day one completely prepared for a role she's not playing. Like,
Oh wait, so Cher took the role that Susan Sarandon was cast in. I
yeah,
had that backwards. I thought it was the other way around, where she was. Because I was gonna say her being the music teacher would have made some sense.
right.
But I don't know. Cher was good in the role. Frankly, I feel like any of them could have played any of the roles. So it's one of those things where I guess I'm just not super passionate about it, because I think all three of them are good enough actresses. If they switched roles, it still would have been a good movie. I do think Susan Sarandon's good in the sense that she looks really frumpy as a music teacher until she gets, lets loose.
Until she becomes
I
sexy.
don't know.
She gets a makeover and is sexy.
I mean, not to say, well, no, actually, to say George Miller was out of his mind, it's like, dude, it's Cher.
Right.
Cher is like a Tolkien elf. She doesn't age. I don't even know what she looks like now, but she probably looks like she's like 50, even though she's in her 80s.
She looks amazing.
So I will say, if Cher had been the music teacher, I don't know if it would have been like those 90s rom-coms where you take the glasses off the girl and she's magically beautiful. Like, I don't know if I would have bought Cher as like a frumpy music teacher.
Yeah.
That's my only real complaint with that. But I don't know. I mean, again, I think all three of them are good enough actresses. It doesn't really matter who they played. They did a good job.
Well, and then I guess because of this whole switch up, there was tension, between Susan Sarandon and Cher for like a portion set, and then I guess they had a walk off where they got all flipped out, and so they like Cher I think walked out, and then Susan went and bought her a beer. I think it was that was the way it went, and they talked about it, and they realized that that all their problems were the fault of the producers, who were strange, and they were just being manipulated by them, and so they made up and they were fine. But so this whole set was interesting. So in addition to them having problems, George Miller had problems because this was his first American production, and this was also his first time really dealing with Hollywood productions. So he technically quit the movie twice and was brought back both times by Jack Nicholson. This was interesting to note. During the studio met with him as a way they want to figure out ways to cut costs. And one of the things that he mistakenly said, he's like, well, I'm going to be on set the whole time. I don't need a trailer, so don't get me a trailer. Like, that'll save some money. So because of that, the studio kind of just thought George Miller was like a pushover and they could just do whatever they wanted. So like, he had a lot of problems where he would like ask for so many extras. They would send half that. He needed this many cameras. They'd send him one, and it was a whole thing. So it got to the point where, George Miller was like, okay, until everything I need is here, we're not shooting anything. And so the studio mistakenly thought, okay, we'll just replace him. Well, the problem is Jack Nicholson, I guess, was such a huge supporter and advocate of George Miller that he threatened to walk off the movie. And that kind of put Warner Brothers in their place. So Jack Nicholson kept him on this film, and then he also kind of just started teaching him the ways of Hollywood. He's like, listen, this is what you do. If you need 300 extras, ask for 600 because they'll send you half. He was teaching him the ways of how to do all this stuff. But he was like really there. It was really a big support to George Miller, and I thought that was pretty nice. Now I mentioned that the producers of this were pretty interesting. One of them, John Peters, who was also involved in the whole Cher and Susan Sarandon incident, decided partway through the movie that he wanted to include aliens in the film. Which, I'm sorry, where do those fit in? Like, at all? And
someone needs to take their brain medicine.
And people were, I think, so later George was like, I think he just saw that, I guess Aliens had done really well and wanted to like feed on that, but like it made no sense in the story. This was not an alien movie. Like, he even brought like a stunt man to set dressed as an alien and told him to put him somewhere in the shots. And George and Jack Nicholson were like, no, see ya. And they walked off. So there was a lot of drama, a lot of drama on this set.
That's actually funny because, again, I just keep thinking back to Death Becomes Her, and I feel like I remember that production went super smoothly, unless I'm remembering incorrectly. I don't even think we talked really much about any like drama on that production. So
yeah,
that's interesting. And also, I mean, it kind of goes to show sometimes adversity on set can lead to good things, because this was nominated for a ton of awards and it did really well that year and everything. So, sometimes you end up making a few diamonds with all that pressure, I guess.
Well, it's, I guess, like this whole experience was so traumatizing George. He went back and just did Australia stuff for a while,
Yeah.
and was like, I don't remember. He did come back to Hollywood because I know he did Babe and stuff in the
Yeah, well, and
90s.
also he did. Babe would have been probably what he was working on right after this, because that was only a few years later.
I thought Babe was in the 90s.
91 or
Oh,
90.
it was 90.
No, 94 or something like that. So no, he would have done something else before this,
Yeah.
or before Babe, I mean.
Um,
But it's close to when he was doing Babe.
yeah. So, so like, poor guy. I mean, poor guy asterisk, because I'm still upset at what he did to Cher, because Cher is a
Yeah.
national treasure. But so yeah, so there was a lot of drama on this set. Um, there was as far as like special effects goes, like I said, ILM did a lot of the effects for this movie. Um, I thought this was funny. So the scene with the tennis match scene, that entire
Yes.
scene was done by ILM because they
I could
said that
tell.
the actresses were not good at tennis. So they had to. They said I think it doubled their workload for that scene, because instead of just animating the floating ball and everything, or however they produced that, they had to do even the normal tennis shots, because the actresses weren't good at it. One of the other things that was funny is the scene where Veronica Cartwright, I think her name was Felicia, when she's throwing up all the cherry pits at her house. I guess that was a longer sequence that they actually produced an animatronic of her that would, vomit up these cherry pits. But they cut most of that because test audiences thought it was too disgusting. And I guess they worked pretty hard on. There was another ending that was shot. I don't know what else was in it, but they specifically mentioned that it had Jack Nicholson walking on water. So
Ooh.
that was interesting. So, like I said, there was just a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes here. But I didn't think that this movie would have this much going on, like, at all.
No, me too. I'm very engaged with all of this tea. It's crazy, because it's such a not really, it's not the type of movie you would expect there to be a lot of drama on. It seemed
Right.
like the sort of thing where you'd imagine it was like summer vacation, just a few months out in like, a nice like Massachusetts town during sunny days, just like going out and playing tennis. And it's one of those movies, it doesn't, you wouldn't think that it would be very daunting outside of some of the special effects stuff.
Right. Well, interesting you mentioned Massachusetts. This was filmed in Rhode Island, but I guess Massachusetts really wanted it filmed in their state. Because if you think about
Yeah.
it, Witches, Salem, Massachusetts. So they tried really, really hard to get it filmed in this. Most of it wasn't. It was mostly filmed in Rhode Island. But they said that the what's his name? The location scout. He let's see. I wrote it down. Here we go. Sam, I think it's Sam Marson. He clocked about 20,000 miles in the Northeast doing location scouts, trying to find locations for this film, because there were certain things they needed very specifically, and they would find bits here and there, but they needed it to all be together. So he said he clocked about 20,000 miles just doing the scouting, and the Lennox house, that Jack Nicholson's character Daryl lives in, was actually an amalgamation of like 3 different places. They said that they used Castle Hill in Ipswich, Massachusetts for the exterior. The main hall was the Wang Theater in Boston, and other interiors were the Greystone Mansion in Beverly Hills, with 2 things: the pool and the office of the house being on a soundstage. But it kind of reminded me just again of The Shining, and how they kind of like Frankenstein a building together from all these different shots. And it actually kind of makes sense if you watch it, because there's parts of it where like the interiors don't like, not like the layout, but like the style doesn't line up at all. Just in my opinion. But
Welcome to Hollywood, baby. That's how we make our crazy houses.
That's how they make things happen. The movie was adapted into a successful musical in the West End in 2000. And John Updike's last book was actually a sequel to this. And I didn't write down what it was called, but it was actually a sequel to this. So, with all that being said, what are your thoughts on all that? Because I kind of
before I get into my thoughts on all that, one question, since you did all this research, I mentioned to someone in my personal life that I was reviewing this movie for this podcast, and they said, "Oh, which one?" And I was like, "The one." Like, they seem to think that there's a whole bunch of Witches of Eastwick sequels. Is that real, or is the person I was talking to completely delusional? Like, do you know if there's a bunch of Witches of Eastwick movies besides this one?
From what I read, there was only one Witches of Eastwick. There was, I think, I could be wrong, I think there may have been a television adaptation later of like a TV movie of the books, and like not an adaptation of this. And they did try to do a series and I think sometime in the 2000s, kind of again more closely aligned with the book. But I can't think of another series. But I just found out that one of the people who reviewed the book when it first came out, I think, was Margaret Atwood, which I thought was pretty funny. Yeah, she was reviewed the book when it came out, because I totally forgot that she was a columnist. But yeah, I don't know what they're referring to unless there's something I'm missing, because I only came across.
I just thought I'd ask, because they seem to be very certain that there was a whole bunch of movies, but they also.
Are you sure they weren't thinking of Halloween Town?
Well, I was going to ask if they were talking about like Hocus Pocus or something. I don't think the person knew what they meant. I just thought I'd ask, because I after they said that, I was genuinely curious. Like, oh, is this like the beginning of like a franchise or something? But it sounds like it wasn't. So my thoughts, as I said, this is a very well-made movie. I will say, with the ILM effects, it reminded me of Death Becomes Her, where it's like, for the time, I bet it looked really good, but when I'm watching now, I'm like, oh, this is an optical effect with the tennis ball and stuff. So, it's easy for me to criticize it now, but at the time it looked pretty good. It probably looked pretty good. I think it looks kind of dated now, but what are you going to do about it? My issue mostly has to do with the story. Like, so... I've defended movies about nothing before, and I wouldn't exactly say that's what this is. It's the narrative felt kind of meandering to me. Like, this was one where I was curious where it was going to go, and then as the movie was going on, I was like, okay, where is this going? Because it kind of felt like 90% of the movie was just like the three of them hanging out with Jack Nicholson and having casual sex and just being at his cool mansion all the time.
I mean, but what else are you supposed to do with Jack Nicholson? I'm just kidding.
Right? No, but like, it's, for a while I was kind of like, is this going anywhere, or is this just like the movie is just sexy fun with Jack Nicholson the movie? And by the end, I was kind of, I was getting more into it. Like, ooh, they're going to fight back against him. He killed their friend, all this other stuff. And it's kind of like a Down with Love situation, where I feel like there wasn't much of a message or any kind of point in the story. Because, like, that was something that kind of I found strange, is they were very upset that Felicia was killed. They were sure that it was magic. They have a feeling that Daryl had something to do with it. And then they're like, okay, we're going to get him out of our life. And then, Susan Sarandon's character is basically just like, oh, no, I don't want him to leave, or whatever. They're like fighting amongst themselves. So they create a voodoo doll. There's like this whole funny sequence of him like getting hurt while he's out in town buying stuff. And then they burn the doll. He turns into a big monster and disappears. And then... But, like, for the whole thing, they're kind of like, oh, I don't want to hurt him. I don't want... And it's like, I didn't really feel like there was any kind of like it almost felt like it needed to have a climax for the sake of having a climax, because even by the end of the movie, like, not much had happened. And for you guys to think that he had something to do with, like, your friend's death, and you're just kind of like, oh, but he's so great in the bedroom. I don't know. Like, I compared it to Down with Love, because that movie, I felt like, as much as I liked it, it kind of contradicts its own messaging. This one, I feel like it is a very women-centric story, and it is kind of poking fun at, like, religious ideas about single women.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's like, you really portray, I mean, he's supposed to be the devil, right? Like, and if you're doing a thing where you're kind of going against the author's idea in his book about single women being kind of witches, and, you know, it's evil if you're a single woman, you would think that maybe the screenwriter would depict the devil as maybe a misunderstood person. But in this movie, he's really not. He's kind of, as I said, to me, he felt very sleazy. Like, he's just going to say what he wants, or what they want to hear, so that he can have sex with them. And then he's going to murder their friend because she's religious and can kind of sense something's going on. And then, yeah, they're all very, like, sensitive about him being sent, or them, you know, doing the voodoo doll thing. It kind of made me not care about what was going on, because they didn't really seem to care either. And also, like, this movie, I think it kind of focused on something that just doesn't really appeal to me very much. It was very, like, battle of the sexes. You know, like, when the voodoo doll stuff is happening, Jack Nicholson goes on this tirade about women being God's mistake and stuff. And it's like, this is a thing. It's never going to go away as long as there are, like, gender norms or whatever. It's going to be a talking point. It's going to be something that people find interesting. And it just does nothing for me. Like, because that's what it felt like, is it's like the three of them, ooh, men are terrible because of this, this, and this. And Jack Nicholson, oh, women are terrible because of this, this, and this. And then there's never really, like, a point made about this. You know what I mean? It almost feels like it was just kind of trying to appeal to people who just want to crap on the opposite gender. And it's just something that does not appeal to me. I think it is something that has persisted into this day and age, where you have, you know, now even more misogynists. Like, you've got, like, Andrew Tate, and you've got, like, it's just cancerous to me, and I don't really care about it. Well, but that's not the movie's fault. You know what I mean?
Right.
It is interesting that you mentioned the screenwriter did Bonfire of the Vanities, because maybe that has something to do with why it just didn't gel with me. It just felt very clumsy. And I've been comparing this to Death Becomes Her a lot. And that movie is great for me, anyway. And it also has, like, a more focused plot. Like, there's actual, like, goals being set up in the movie. Like, I want to become immortal. Now I've got to, you know, stuff is happening in that movie where it makes sense where the goalpost is being moved for the next story beat. And I didn't really get that in this one. And also, just for entertainment value, I found in that movie, it also is kind of a more woman-centric story. Like, it's probably not going to appeal to a lot of guys, but just watching this feud between these two immortal women was really funny for me.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't really need to be a woman to get entertainment out of that.
Right.
And I don't think you need to be a woman to appreciate this movie, but I feel like, at least for people who are like me, and kind of want to at least see where the movie is going, it really doesn't go anywhere. Like, the only, you know, we spoil the movies, but, like, you know, they end up giving birth to his sons. You know, they're basically three cute little antichrists, and they get his house because he melted into oblivion after the voodoo doll. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, because he's the devil, he's still able to, like, try and see his kids. And that's part of the reason I wanted to also ask if there was a sequel, because the way it ended could have set up sequels. So I was curious, like, oh, did they do one? Anyway, but yeah, so that's really all of my problems with the movie. It has nothing to do with anything about the filmmaking. It's all subjective problems, you know, from my own personal taste.
So I kind of agree with you on a few of these points. Definitely, I will say that this movie is one you definitely feel the length of it, because I feel like during a lot of the first, maybe even the first hour, like you said, I feel like it meanders around a little bit. And I kind of feel like they make their points pretty quickly, but then they try to keep making them. Like, all three of them are seduced within the first half hour of the movie. That was fine, and then I kind of wished at that point, maybe like 15 minutes, in the next 15 minutes or so, they would have kind of revealed, the women would have kind of like found out, how evil he was or what he was capable of. Because they really don't know that, or they know, because like to them, oh, he has magic, but it's kind of fun because he's doing fun stuff with them. They really don't know what he's capable of until Felicia um is killed. So I guess I do think How to Manage, I do think the length is felt in this movie. I do think that there is some sort of message at the end. Like when you call them the cute little antichrists. I do think that there's a commentary there that George Miller is very, very familiar with how great his female characters are in like I almost said Fast Furious, excuse me, the Mad Max movies specifically. I'm talking about Fury Road. I do think there is a commentary on toxic masculinity at the end, with the women being able to control, not control, but like see and make sure that their sons, because they've noticed they're all boys, have positive messages and positive viewpoints, and basically the way they raise them is how they turn out. So even though they are all capable of what Jack is capable of, because they're not being raised by Jack, they won't turn out the way like all the sucky men that they are talking, that they talk about at the beginning of the movie. So I do think there is sort of a message there. I wouldn't say it's the overall message of the movie, but that's definitely a message put through at the end. But yeah, I do agree with you. It does meander around the beginning a lot. I do feel like the movie should be a lot tighter. I do feel like maybe we're missing some narrative beats in there somewhere, because it almost feels like they weren't quite sure what they wanted to do with the characters until maybe about 3/4 of the way through the movie, how they wanted to wrap things up. Because I really don't feel like they really set up anything at the beginning or in the middle for the ending. So I do definitely think it does have some narrative structure problems there. That being said, though, is about not having a message really meaning, is I really just think this is kind of just like a fun sort of autumn movie. And it's really not trying to really be anything more than that. So those, I guess, is kind of like my like sort of not rebuttal, but just, additional information to what you said. Because I do admit, yeah, this movie does have some narrative problems. I said one of the big things for me has always been like the length of the movie. It just feels long for what it is. But yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And as I said, like thinking about it too, it's like I feel like if there is any issue, like real complaints, it's with the screenwriter, because he's, George Miller didn't write this,
Yeah.
or at least he did. Maybe he has a credit on it or something, but the screenwriter of Bonfire of the Vanities wrote this, so I'm going to chalk it up to his terrible right. No, but yeah, you said what I said pretty much. It felt unfocused more than anything. It's kind of like, again, if you're gonna make a movie that's sort of going against the grain of the original author's intent with the story, it's like, and it almost felt like it was gonna go that way too, because in the very beginning of the movie, before they call that rainstorm, the like principal of the school is being super pervy and creepy with Susan Sarandon.
Yeah.
And then he's talking about like moral values and a good Christian, this country's going to the dogs and stuff. So I was like,
because
thinking,
of divorce and single mothers.
Right? Like, yeah, he's just going off on his religious tirade, despite it being a public school, and he shouldn't be saying anything about that. So that's where I was kind of thinking, maybe that's sort of going to be something that, is a big part of the movie. And it could have been, but it never was. Again,
I
like
mean,
if you could have made it like, what if Jack Nicholson's devil is, he's a sinner, but he's more he's not just about like seeing them as housewives or sex objects. You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
if he was not BSing them when he was telling them all of these, ooh, women are important and all this. Like, again, to me, it felt very con artisty. Like, he's just saying what they want to hear. If he meant it and that was his character, is like, hey, he's the devil, but he has more respect for women, that could have been an interesting way to take the movie, and maybe it would have been like The Town versus him or something.
yeah.
Or if you're going to make him the bad guy, you need to make him the bad guy. Again, like I see where you're coming from with the three little antichrists, but
God, you
it's
could
hard
just
to
call
really
them
draw
babies.
the baby antichrists.
Oh my
Like, whatever. If you had seen them acting, because that's the thing, you only get like maybe 2 minutes of the babies at the end of the movie, and you don't really see them being raised more than just like their mothers, being around them. But in that time, they're talking about how much they miss him and they wish they could bring him back. And it's like, which is it, guys? Is he a irredeemable bastard who you don't want in your lives, or do you, or that's what gets to me. It's like, he's either a villain or he isn't. Make up your mind. Like, if you're going to, especially if you're going for like a toxic masculinity thing, I feel like it really kind of poisons the well when you're just, oh, but he's so sweet in all these other ways. It sucks that he murdered my friend, but he's just so sweet. You know what I mean? Like that, it just kind of, I guess it's like off-putting to me. Like, what do you want?
What do you want, people?
Well, that's like the misogynistic, stereotype of women is they can't make decisions. It's like, why is this movie buying into that? Like, none of them can agree on whether or not they want to stay with Jack Nicholson. It's like, it's hard for me to care if the main characters can't even make up their minds.
Well, I kind of always read that scene, it's almost like in the same vein of like an addict, just because you're clean doesn't mean you don't miss it. So that's kind of how I read that scene. So to me, that was very humanizing. I would say, though, if there was any sort of message to this movie, because we had, Susan Sarandon's character who was kind of just, from being kind of beat down by life. Michelle Pfeiffer's, overwhelmed by her kids. And then, let's be real, Cher's character, I believe, is left bitter after her divorce and stuff like that, even though she won't admit it. Or no, after, I think her husband left her. I'm trying to remember. I forget what her story is.
So Susan Sarandon's divorced. Cher is a widower, widow. Excuse me.
Oh yeah, that's right. She's
a widow. And then the Michelle Pfeiffer, her husband, abandoned her. So not divorced, but he just never came home after getting that pack of cigarettes.
Got it. Yeah. So with all of them having kind of their own baggage as far as men goes, kind of holding them back, I would almost say that the magic part of them that they're trying to, that they don't even realize they really have amongst themselves until I think almost the end of the movie. I mean, I think they realize because they're able to get rid of him. Yeah, they realize towards the end of the movie that they have this power, but it's almost like finding like your own inner strength inside of you to create your own life. I do kind of think that overall is kind of like what the message is, or at least trying to be. It's like you said, we have all these different things going on. We have these random, tangents, all this stuff. But I think if I was to pick something out that's supposed to be the message, I think it's supposed to be that the magic is metaphorical for like, finding your strength within sort of thing. Because it's always, it's not even like they speak things. It's like what they're, it's like what
thinking.
They can't thinking exactly. It's what they're thinking. It's what's in, basically, for lack of better, it's what's inside that counts almost. But it's not related to beauty. But I think there's like just there's supposed to be something about inner strength and everything and all this sort of stuff. Although I do love that one reviewer, and I wish I'd written it down, but I didn't. They said the most magical thing about this movie, because I guess they weren't a fan of it. Most magical things about this movie is how Michelle Pfeiffer has 5 kids, is a single parent, and still has time to like run off and have casual sex with Jack Nicholson all the time.
It's kind of a good point. Although, like, they do answer that in the movie. As much as I think that's funny, I don't think that critic was paying attention. Jack Nicholson let the kids come to his mansion. They were
Oh, that is true.
when she was having the casual sex. They were just in one of his like 30 bedrooms.
Right. They were just. I forgot about that too. I was like, oh yeah, that's right. He brings them over and they have the balloon parties and everything.
Exactly.
And that's fun. You know, I'm trying to realize. I'm trying to understand though, like what, you know, Jack Nicholson's character. Cause like I said, if my message was an inner strength, it was almost like, you know, it's like they were all depending on this Jack Nicholson character for their happiness. And when they decided to cut it off, they were all freaked out and they were like depressed about it, you know. But then they were able, like I said, they're happy at the end of the movie with their own family, with their, not saying you have to have a family, but they have their own kids, they have their own lives. They're not with someone else. I think they basically, they found their strength to, you know, be them, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So I guess there is a message there, but it's whether or not, you know, it was strong enough in it. And I do feel like there could have been more, like you said, more representations of that message or something in the movie, because you had trouble, like you just said, finding it at all.
Well, no, I got that from, like, throughout the movie, they're banding together, you know, and they're kind of friends because of the situation they're in. I don't think that, again, my issue is more that there wasn't much of a structure with this movie. It's not even that this has to have, like, some moral message about, oh, and this is why you don't trust the charismatic man who comes in and buys the $1 billion mansion in town. Like, it doesn't need to have like a moral. It just kind of, like you said, the film feels its length because it is about 2 hours long, and you kind of get the point of what's going on about like 50 minutes into the movie, but it just keeps going. You know, it's like how many scenes of them having fun with Jack Nicholson do I need to see before I get it, guys? Like, I get that they're having a weird quadruple relationship together. Like, I don't need another scene of another, and that too, as I said, my issue, you have a great explanation for it, them being like addicts, but again, that was kind of my thing with the ending, is it's like, it's hard for me to care about you banishing Jack Nicholson from your life if you guys aren't even sure that he's bad enough to do that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And considering, like, that's the thing too, we haven't talked too much about the whole Felicia side of the story, but like I was kind of thinking she was going to be a religious bigot, but she wasn't really. Like, it almost was kind of like hysteria brought on by her sickness. And she was like friends with these women before, so she didn't care about them being, you know, single women or anything like that. And she wasn't a religious nutcase before her accident. So it's honestly, like, if you think about what happened to Felicia, it's actually pretty messed up, because she didn't do anything really to deserve what happened to her, and she had probably the most horrific death. Well, really the only horrific death in the movie, and it does make you kind of wonder why they're defending Jack Nicholson so much. Like, I know there is kind of the question of, oh, well, it was like an accident. How could, you know, because they don't even really believe in magic despite all the crazy stuff always going on. So yeah. Again, that's kind of my personal issue with it, which if I were to argue that it's a problem, it would be the screenwriter specifically, because he's the one who wrote the script. But it just feels really meandering and unfocused. And again, it's not so much that there needs to be like a moral message. It's just kind of like, if the protagonists don't even care that they're defeating the villain, so to speak, why should I?
Right.
Know?
And I can see that.
But that's really my only issue with the movie. Otherwise, I think it's pretty great. I think it's a little long for the entertainment side of things, but it's very appropriate for this time of year, and It does. That's the thing. Despite what I just said about Felicia, if you're like a horror person like me and you like some messed up deaths, you do get at least one of them in this. And I kind of wish they had gotten a little bit more into the special effects when Jack Nicholson was kind of mutating back into the devil. I wish they'd done that more. It almost felt like the movie was afraid to just come out and say he was the devil. I wonder why. Did you get that feeling too? It almost felt because to me it was like obviously he's the devil, but they never say it. They never even like suggested in the movie, and the movie is rated R. Like, why are you tiptoeing around this? Why don't you just say he's the devil?
Right, like the closest they get to it is right before Felicia dies. She's like, "I need to warn them. He's trying to breathe 3 more with them," or something like that. But again, she never says the devil is trying to. He just says, "Oh, he." It was almost. He said it was kind of like a Voldemort situation. It's like he who shall not be named, sort of thing. When it's like they did everything possible to not say that, and the only thing I can think of with that is that they wanted it to be, as it was still a worldwide release. They wanted it to be as universal as possible. So I think the only thing I can think of is maybe they were hoping that whatever culture this was released in, you would see Jack Nicholson as that culture's evil thing, or your religion's evil thing. That's the only thing I can think of.
That makes more sense because again, if this were like PG or something, I would understand. Oh, maybe they're trying to make it family friendly. But when it's like an R-rated movie, I'm just like, why are you? Just say it. Just say he's the devil. Why are you afraid to say he's the devil?
I do wish we'd gotten some more backstory on Felicia, because I want to know, because even before she has her accident where she falls down the stairs, she's aware of something going on, because the first time we really see her is when she comes in and oh no, maybe it's the second time we see her, and they're like, "Oh yeah, somebody bought the Lennox house," and she like drops what she's carrying and is just like 1,000-yard stare. And it's like I just want to, why is she the one that is gifted with this sight to see or to understand what's going on, even though she can't communicate it, she knows what's going on. Why her? That was kind of like my question. Why her this whole time? And like I said, I do think she has like the only death, but it's a pretty horrific death, because even though they don't show it, when her husband's done, he just sits back down in front of the fire and just keeps reading. Like, that is like the coldest thing I think I've ever seen in a long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's supposed to be implied that, Jack Nicholson's character Daryl took control of him. He's like, I don't want. I interpret that as, he didn't want the word to get out what he was doing to these women, so he took care of her via Clyde. But that was just so cold. Just going back and reading.
She's having one of her fits again, where she vomits out thousands of cherry pits. Oh, women, am I right, guys? When they're vomiting out cherry pits dozens at a time.
As apparently you're very familiar with. So with all that being said, overall, how would you rate this film?
Well, it's not bad. Again, it doesn't really appeal to me. I'm giving this a pretty, lukewarm 2.5 out of 4. It's not bad. It's still, super, super well done. As I said, I think all of the actors are great. Jack Nicholson's one of my personal favorites. The music is really good. Gets into your head. You'll be hearing it in your thoughts for like days after. It's got that was another thing with George Miller directing. I almost forgot to say is he has kind of a very cartoony style, for lack of a better word. Comic style is a better word for it.
Yeah,
where it's like you see it a lot in Mad Max with how crazy things get, but you can see it in Babe and stuff where it almost feels like cartoony is not a good word for it because that makes it sound like it's very exaggerated, but it has like this sort of, as I said, like comic nature to it, where it's very maybe not realistic,
like over the top.
Not entirely, because I don't think I think maybe some of the performances, mostly by Jack Nicholson, would get over the top, but it is so hard to explain what I'm talking about with George Miller, but it's where it feels larger than life, even if it's
Yeah.
something mundane. He has a way of moving the camera or making it feel almost like an illustration. And
I think I know. I think I know what you're
trouble
talking about.
articulating what I mean. But Mad Max is a great example where it is live action, and you've got crazy costumes and stuff. But like he has a way of making it feel almost like unreal, and he does that in kind of his other movies too. And I feel like you get that from this movie. But yeah, it as far as the story goes, I'd much rather watch something like Death Becomes Her. For me, that movie was a little bit more funny. I liked that there actually was like a distinct thing that the main character was trying to accomplish, which made the story have like a framework you could hang on. But that being said, most of it is just subjective criticism based on my own feelings, so it's not bad. But 2.5 for me.
Okay. That's actually pretty fair. And I'm actually going to go ahead and put it in the same category. Like I said, for me, one of the big things is what you touched on, how it seems to meander a while. I think to me, sometimes it comes across when he was writing it, he wasn't sure how he wanted to end things until he kind of got to the final act. And I feel like it's just really long for what it is. I feel like I feel like it's good, but it could be better. And it's good. It's not amazing and could be better. It's good, but that's why I have it as a 2.5. I will say, though, this was a successful enough formula that it actually served as the formula for other movies that came out in the 90s, namely Practical Magic and The Craft. So I'm going to have to watch those and kind of see if they kind of did this formula better. Like I said, that being said, that's 2.5 pitchers of sweet tea out of 4 for me. So
Practical Magic, I've heard good things about. That was someone recommended that recently.
I almost said Practical Magic instead of Witches of Eastwick this year, but
maybe that's who I heard it from. But yeah, what do you guys listening think? Let us know in the comments if you're listening on YouTube. If you're listening to us on Spotify or Apple, go ahead and follow us. Maybe check out one of our backlogged episodes. Like and subscribe, follow us on Threads. In case you're wondering why we rate things out of 4, sometimes I like to interject and just remind people we are making fun of Siskel and Ebert because they had a 4-star rating system, and I'll never stop saying that that's dumb. And who doesn't do 5 or 10s? So in case you were wondering. But yeah, thanks for hanging out with us, guys. October is over, but we've got some surreal stuff coming next month, and then our famous finale, the 2023 drinking game. Well, you'll get to hear what we think of every movie we saw this year, as well as drink along with us. But until then, I have been Whiskey.
And I have been Sweet Tea.
Keeping it, Kino.
And suck it, Scorsese.
Peace out, witches.
Bye. Reels on the Rocks is a production of La Prince Laboratories. It is edited and produced by Alejandro Castillo and features original artwork by Asa Esparza and original music by Pat Mars. Follow us on Twitter at Reels on the Rocks and tweet at us with any movies or topics you'd like us to discuss in the future.